You were the most helpless creature on the planet, not metaphorically, not as a way of describing how small or innocent you once were. Literally, at the moment of your birth, you were less capable of surviving on your own than almost any other animal on Earth. A baby giraffe stands within an hour. A wildebeest runs with the herd within minutes. You could not lift your own head. You could not regulate your own body temperature. You could not find food, signal danger, or move away from a threat. You were, by every biological measure, completely dependent on other people to keep you alive. And somehow, they did. For hundreds of thousands of years, before hospitals, before formula, before pediatricians and thermometers and infant car seats, humans kept their children alive in conditions that should have made it nearly impossible. The infant mortality rate was catastrophic by modern standards. And yet, the species survived. And yet, you are here. The story of how ancient humans kept children alive is not just a story about the past. It is a story about what your body still expects, what your nervous system still craves, and why so many modern parenting instincts feel like they come from somewhere deeper than any book you have ever read. They do. Start with the most fundamental problem. You are born too early. Compared to other primates, the human infant arrives in a state of dramatic incompleteness. A chimpanzee newborn is far more neurologically developed at birth than you were. The reason is mechanical. Your brain grew too large for the birth canal. So evolution made a compromise. Humans are born earlier in their neurological development than any other primate, with a brain that will continue developing outside the womb for years. Anthropologist Ashley Montague called this exterogestation, the idea that the first year of human life is essentially a second trimester that happens outside the mother's body. This single fact explains almost everything about how ancient humans kept children alive. Because if the baby is essentially still a fetus in many neurological respects, then what it needs is what the womb provided. Warmth, constant contact, the sound of a familiar heartbeat, the rhythm of breathing, motion. In the ancient world, these were not parenting philosophies. They were survival strategies. Across hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy, researchers found a remarkably consistent pattern. Infants were carried on the body almost continuously for the first several years of life. Not placed in bassinets, not set down in safe sleeping spaces, carried against the skin of a caregiver, usually the mother, but frequently other members of the group. Skin-to-skin contact is not a modern hospital intervention. It is one of the oldest infant survival tools in the human repertoire. The physics of this are extraordinary. A newborn human cannot maintain its own body temperature. Place it alone, and it will begin to lose heat almost immediately. Press it against another human body, and its temperature stabilizes within minutes. The caregiver's body reads the infant's temperature and adjusts its own surface heat accordingly, functioning as a biological thermostat. Your skin was the first incubator, but warmth was only the beginning. The ancient infant faced dangers that no modern parent in a developed country ever thinks about. Predators, extreme cold, extreme heat, contaminated water, infectious disease with no treatment, and the crushing reality of food supply, because if the mother could not produce milk, or if she died, the baby died too. Ancient humans solved these problems not with technology, but with each other. Hrdy's landmark research introduced a concept that changed how scientists understand human childhood. She called it cooperative breeding, and the idea is this: humans are the only great apes who routinely allow other individuals to hold, carry, and care for their infants. In most primate species, the mother guards her infant fiercely. A chimpanzee mother will rarely let another individual touch her baby in its first weeks of life. But human mothers, across virtually every culture ever studied, share infant care with a wide network of other people. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, unrelated women in the group, fathers, even older children who are not yet reproductively mature. Hrdy called these individuals alloparents, and her research suggests that the presence of alloparents was not a convenience. It was a survival requirement. The data from traditional societies is striking. Infants who had more alloparents, more people actively invested in their care, had significantly higher survival rates. The grandmother effect, documented extensively by anthropologist Kristen Hawkes, showed that the presence of a maternal grandmother was one of the strongest predictors of infant and child survival in early human populations. This is why humans live so far past reproductive age. Grandmothers are not an evolutionary accident. They are a childcare strategy. The village, it turns out, is not a metaphor. It was a medical intervention. Then there was the problem of food. For the first months of life, breast milk was the only option. There was no alternative. And breast milk is not guaranteed. It requires adequate nutrition for the mother, adequate rest, adequate hormonal conditions, and ideally the kind of low-stress environment that the ancient world almost never provided. Milk supply failures were almost certainly one of the leading causes of infant death in the ancient world. The solution, again, was each other. Wet nursing, the practice of one woman breastfeeding another's infant, is documented in cultures on every inhabited continent and in historical records stretching back thousands of years. It is one of the oldest forms of cooperative childcare. When one mother could not feed her infant, another one did. The community lactated together. As infants moved towards solid food, the transition was handled in ways that would surprise most modern parents. Archaeological evidence and studies of contemporary hunter-gatherer populations suggest that pre-mastication, the practice of a caregiver chewing food and then feeding it directly to an infant, was extremely widespread. The caregiver's digestive process partially broke down the food. The caregiver's saliva introduced enzymes that began the digestion process. And perhaps most importantly, the caregiver's saliva also introduced a controlled exposure to local bacteria, helping the infant's immune system calibrate to the microbial environment it would need to navigate. Your ancestors were probiotic before there was a word for it. Beyond food and warmth and physical protection, ancient humans faced another threat to their children that is rarely discussed: stress. Infant stress is not a modern invention. The ancient world was loud, unpredictable, and full of genuine threats. A constantly crying infant attracted predators. A constantly crying infant exhausted caregivers who already had very little margin for error. A constantly crying infant in a small band of hunter-gatherers was a problem for everyone, not just the parents. The ancient solution was motion. Constant, rhythmic, carrying motion. Pediatric researcher James McKenna has spent decades studying the relationship between infant sleep and parental proximity. What he found is that the infant nervous system was designed to co-regulate with a nearby adult. Infant breathing, heart rate, and sleep cycles are all influenced by the physical presence of a caregiver. An infant sleeping alone is doing something its nervous system was never designed to do. The calming effect of being carried, rocked, and held is not a learned comfort. It is a biological expectation built into your nervous system before you were born. This is why you could not put the baby down. This is why the baby cried every time you tried. The infant was not being difficult. The infant was running an ancient survival protocol that said, if I am not in physical contact with another human, I am in danger. And for hundreds of thousands of years, that protocol was absolutely correct. What does all of this mean for you today? It means that the instincts you feel around infants, the urge to hold them, to respond immediately when they cry, to keep them close at night, to involve the whole family in their care, these are not modern parenting trends or attachment theories invented in the 20th century. They are the echo of a survival system that worked for 100,000 generations. It means that the isolation of modern parenting, the nuclear family alone in a house with a newborn, no village, no grandmother down the hall, no community of alloparents, is one of the most radical departures from the conditions humans evolved to parent in. And the exhaustion, the anxiety, the sense that you cannot possibly do this alone is not weakness. It is your nervous system correctly identifying that something is missing. You were never meant to do this alone. Your ancestors knew this. Every grandmother who moved in after the baby was born knew this. Every neighbor who showed up with food knew this. Every aunt who took the infant so the mother could sleep knew this. The village was not a luxury. It was how the children survived. And here you are, proof that it worked, carrying inside you the biology of 1,000 generations of humans who figured out, slowly and collectively, how to keep the most helpless creature on the planet alive long enough to become you.